Model 3 is the car that's really put Tesla on the map, and this revised version has been thoroughly updated. It's even more avant-garde inside, quieter to drive and better to ride in, plus there's more equipment despite the fact that the entry-level version has a useful price advantage over its rivals. All Model 3s are in this form sleeker and more aerodynamic, helping EV mileage figures that have been gradually improving, with the range of the dual motor version being class leading. So, your next executive saloon? Middle managers who are early adopters of new technology should form an orderly queue.
Tesla's all-electric Model 3 executive saloon was the car that took the American brand into volume territory for the first time. Now it's been significantly improved, and we're going to test it. The very first Model 3s arrived in the US market back in 2017, 2 years before they reached the UK. Back then, this was the most significant car Tesla had introduced in its history, the relatively low-cost, high-volume electric car the company had always wanted to build. In creating it, this American maker battled with bankruptcy, struggled with quality control issues, and fought against production bottlenecks at a Californian plant in Fremont that, until the Tesla era, was resolutely low-tech. Any one of these issues could have killed the company, but instead it delivered on its vision of affordable executive EV motoring and produced a US and European market bestseller that some think is the most important vehicle of the last decade. Even this ambitious US brand couldn't have predicted just how successful the Model 3 would be. In the first 6 years of production, over 2 million were sold. And in the UK, the car even occasionally topped the monthly sales charts, usually when Tesla was flooding the market after a boatload of Model 3s had arrived at Southampton docks. But it was a bestseller on merit, an accessible, high-performance and technologically advanced contender that appeal to a broad audience, and it helped shift perceptions about electric vehicles into the mainstream. By autumn 2023, though, the EV competition was catching up, hence the need for the heavily revised version of the Model 3 that we look at here. Tesla tends to use much longer product cycles than its established rivals. The larger Model S, for instance, is basically the same car that's been on sale since 2012. So, when updates happen, they need to constitute more than just a mere wash and brush up. Hence the extensive so-called Project Highland development package that's brought us this rejuvenated 2024 model year car. It's got far tougher segment competition than the original had, but Tesla reckons it's just as likely to stay on top of the sales charts. Is that optimism justified? And should this Model 3 continue to occupy a place near the top of your wish list if you're shopping in this segment? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the Car and Driving Road Test, to find out. Even if you're used to EVs, getting behind the wheel of a Model 3 is an unusual experience, especially in the case of this updated version. Now, as usual with the brand, everything works via this huge centre screen, which will activate if you've opened the car with the Tesla app or gained entry using the provided RFID card and placed said item on this lower centre dash panel. If you happen to be familiar with the previous version of this car, or you're simply familiar with Teslas, you won't be expecting to find an instrument binnacle, a starter button, a handbrake, or any physical switchgear to control the lights or continually operate the wipers. This improved Model 3 goes further. Here, you don't get instrument stalks either, so there are no conventional indicators and no conventional gear stick, which might initially leave you confused as to how to instigate forward or reverse motion. It turns out that you do that by swiping up or down on a trackpad to the right of this central screen, which activates when you press the brake pedal. Now you're ready. But for what? Well, a more luxury-orientated driving experience for sure, and not only because of this higher quality cabin. Tesla listens to criticism and has used this Project Highland Model 3 update to improve the two main criticisms we made of the drive dynamics of this car at its original launch: a rather over-firm ride and questionable levels of refinement for an EV. Yes, the ride's still a little on the firm side, but updated suspension tuning means that it no longer feels quite as brittle over the really poor surfaces that used to throw up a few creaks and rattles in the old car. Those have largely been eradicated too. Unfortunately, the ride still can't be embellished with the kind of adaptive damping system that Tesla doesn't want to offer at this price point. While tweaking the wishbone front multi-link rear suspension, Tesla also took the opportunity to improve the suspension bushings, as well as enhancing this car's seals and sound-deadening materials. And the result, combined with the use of 360-degree acoustic glass, is a huge improvement in noise suppression. Apart from the different control layout, it's the main thing you'll notice coming to this car from its predecessor. The brand reckons that wind and ambient noise levels have been reduced by 30%. Impact noise, that's stones hitting the underside and so on, is down by 25%, and general road noise is down by 20%. All these claims seem entirely credible. Otherwise, things are much as before, or at least they are once you've got used to having to operate the indicators from these buttons on the left-hand wheel spoke. Getting rid of the usual wheel stalk and installing these must have seemed a very good idea to designers at Tesla's US HQ seeking further minimalisation. And in America, you'd probably adjust to the change in functionality quite quickly. But the US doesn't have that many roundabouts, and when traversing these in Blighty, you often find the left-hand wheel spoke isn't where you need it to be to press the buttons. As a result, you often end up not indicating and annoying other road users. It isn't this cabin's only ergonomic issue, but we'll return to that subject later. First though, you'll want to know that the mainstream Model 3 product lineup isn't much different to before, though it's worth noting that EV driving range has improved significantly compared to the last time we tested this car back in 2019. Things kick off with an entry-level rear-wheel drive single-motor version using a battery size of around 58 kilowatt hours and a rear axle electric motor generating 242 brake horsepower, which means 62 miles an hour in 5.8 seconds en route to 140. Driving range at this point in the lineup remains pretty modest by segment standards, now rated at 318 miles. The pricier alternative is the mid-level, long-range, dual-motor all-wheel drive variant we're trying here, which features a battery size of around 70 kilowatt hours. This more satisfying Model 3 has a second electric motor, the extra one mounted on the front axle, so creating the all-wheel drive format. Collectively, the two motors put out 346 brake horsepower, propelling the car really rather rapidly indeed to 62 miles an hour in 4.2 seconds en route to 145 miles an hour. Ignore these performance extremes and you might get somewhere close to this long-range dual-motor variant's quoted driving range figure of 390 miles, which is segment-leading. At the time of this test in early 2024, Tesla hadn't yet reintroduced the further lineup-topping performance version of this car, but we were expecting an updated version of that derivative to shortly follow, so we'll quickly brief you on the major things you need to know about that flagship variant later in this section. Here though, our main focus is on the mainstream Model 3s that almost all customers will want, which, as we've already suggested, should be quite quick enough for almost everyone. This Tesla's forward thrust is really well judged and linear. Unlike earlier EVs, it doesn't hurl itself at the horizon with sickening abandon, but there's still a very satisfying feeling of gathering urgency, and despite the prodigious 1.8-ton curb weight, there's always a crisp and instant response to the throttle for mid-range overtaking. That linearity of throttle travel is crucial. The sensitivity of your right foot, for instance, becomes of vital importance, replacing clutch pedal or paddle shift technique and coordination that users will be used to from previous combustion cars they might have owned. There's actually a whole new driving dynamic in play if you can be bothered to adjust yourself to it. For sure, it's strange not to have an engine note orally guiding you through your various driving tasks, but after a while in a Model 3, you might begin to find the absence of that soundtrack equally enriching, helping to focus your mind on things like steering feel, cornering angles, and the way the car is responding beneath you. At which point, what'll you feel here? Superbly accurate steering for a start. It's in a different league to what you get in larger Teslas, though still lacks the final, really feelsome element that's integral to a good European rack, such as you'd find, for instance, on a rival BMW i4. But Tesla's got close, and we remain impressed by just how much of a driver's car this fledgling brand has managed to produce in its first attempt at the mid-sized sports saloon genre. Even quite pricey larger EVs still lurch over speed humps, crash through potholes and shift their bulk uncertainly around through tighter corners at speed, but here there's little of that. In fact, if you somehow didn't know this was an electric vehicle, you'd be unlikely to guess the fact from the way it rides the bumps or takes the turns. When cornering quickly, you're certainly aware of this car's extra battery weight, your senses heightened by the required slightly higher seating position, but outside of a racetrack it really isn't much of an issue, thanks to that low centre of gravity and a near perfect 48 to 52 front to rear percentage weight distribution. In this dual motor version, things are even better. Here the two drive units are programmed to constantly shift power from front to rear to keep each motor in its power and efficiency sweet spot, with one motor geared for quick acceleration and the other tuned for efficient high-speed cruising. So effective is this whole setup that the normal penalty for extra weight, the potential reduction you'd expect in operating range, has been easily overcome. What else? Well, interestingly, Tesla doesn't believe in giving its drivers the plethora of different driving modes you'll find on obvious rivals. This revised Model 3 even loses the original car's two selectable brake regeneration modes. Apparently, brake regen's now been set on maximum all the time, and to be fair, the energy recuperation system seems well judged, as is the feeling you get through the brake pedal, less grabby, more natural feeling than in most competitors. As well as lacking brake regen modes, you do without conventional drive settings too. Instead, as before, the central screen's pedals and steering menu offers three steering settings: comfort, standard or sport, and two acceleration modes, standard and the rather cringingly named chill. You can also activate a slip start setting that eases the car away if you happen to be stuck on snow, mud or sand. We'll quickly touch on the top performance flagship version of this car. We said previously we'd brief you on that. As we said earlier, details of this derivative hadn't yet been announced at the time of this test in early 2024, but we don't expect its spec to differ hugely from that of the pre-facelift model, which would mean that the dual motor powertrain should offer an output of around 450 brake horsepower, which in the original model meant the car was good for 62 miles an hour in just 3.2 seconds en route to 162 miles an hour. The 70 kilowatt battery shared with this ordinary dual motor variant and in the pre-facelift car offered a driving range of 329 miles. That original Model 3 performance had bespoke grippy Michelin P44S tyres, Brembo competition-style brakes and a selectable track mode. This activates a kind of torque vectoring system that shuttles torque between front and rear axles to offer either more or less cornering rotation as required. Also part of performance spec is what the brand calls a vehicle dynamics controller that eases back the normally quite intrusive traction and stability control systems so that they allow more slip. So much so, in fact, that pro driver circuit corner drifting is even possible. This kind of driving can be rough on the car's cooling system, so track mode recalibrates that to cool the car more aggressively and proactively. But let's get back to the mainstream versions. Since this is a Tesla, we should talk not only about how you can drive it, but also how it can potentially drive itself, courtesy of the 8 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors, and the forward-facing radar that activates its autopilot system with its integrated auto steer function. Autopilot will position the car centrally within its lane, keep to a chosen speed, regulate the distance to the vehicle in front, and if you pay extra for the enhanced version of this system, even perform lane changes automatically. All you have to do for autopilot functionality to be operative is to keep your hand on the wheel at all times. If you're using the system, make sure that's all you do. Even fractional unintended steering inputs will disable the system, a setup that can occasionally overreact to cars around you that the cameras have only just detected. Room for improvement then, but that's just what Tesla has in mind. Pay the extra to future-proof your Model 3 with extra cost packages, and your car will receive ongoing over-the-air updates that will add in fresh new elements of autonomous driving kit as legislation allows for it. As the brand knows to its irritation, those laws can vary quite a lot country to country. For instance, the summon system that the optional enhanced autopilot pack will eventually include, allowing you to stand outside your car and park it remotely using a smartphone, is much more sophisticated in the US. There, if you return from shopping unsure as to the location of your Model 3, having left it in a busy car park, a click on the summon option will see the car drive out and find you, provided you're only a few parking rows away. But much more than that is in store for those of the Teslarati who don't mind surrendering full driving duties to their cars. Eventually, the top full self-driving capability software package will include the auto steer on city streets feature that will make everyday completely automated driving a reality. Ultimately, the plan is that all you'll ever have to do is to get in and out of whatever Tesla you've bought. It'll even know where you want it to go if you've programmed your movements into your online calendar. So you get the idea here. Other brands are thinking of this kind of technology. Tesla's actually going out and delivering it, or at least where it's allowed to anyway. The way this Californian company tells it, buying into a Model 3 is a starting point for a whole new kind of automotive life. Maybe it is, maybe you're not quite ready for that. It's coming though, and this car reassures us that there's at least something in that future to look forward to. It's a mark of Tesla's brand identity that even someone unacquainted with EVs would probably recognise this car's maker. They might perhaps be less likely to recognise it as a Model 3, though on closer inspection, the cues are quite distinct, though still very much EV orientated. Tesla says that the key difference with this evolved Model 3 lies with its sleeker exterior design, which sees sharper body lines and aero-optimised surfaces, reduce drag, improve wind noise and increase range. The changes made in those areas aren't really very evident here at the side, where the only real update lies with these redesigned wheels shod with range-optimised tyres and available in mainstream models in 18-inch form as standard, which is what we have here, with larger mileage-sapping 19-inch rims being optional. As before, this Model 3 is a saloon, breaking from the hatchback body configuration of other current Tesla cars and continuing to measure in at 4.7 metres long, fractionally more than a BMW 3 Series. From this profile perspective, you notice the short bonnet, facilitated by the skateboard-style chassis that locates the drivetrain and the batteries as low as possible in the car, enhancing interior space and lowering the centre of gravity. Tesla Arty will notice a lower waistline than that of the larger Model S, but an almost equally large glass area with even more glass overhead, courtesy of a standard two-piece panoramic roof, embellishing a high arching roofline that means you're unlikely to lose this car in a crowded parking lot. A mid-level crease line flows above the flush-fitting door handles with a shorter, higher one emphasising the rear haunches, plus a lower crease separates the wheel arches. As far as this Project Highland update package is concerned, though, the major changes feature here at the front, where the headlamps have been completely restyled, incorporating these slim daytime running light strips. These frowning headlights are now powerful enough to mean that there's no need for the separate front fog lamps that were previously fitted, so those have been removed, allowing the bumper to be reshaped in a quest for the greater aerodynamic efficiency that's so crucial for an EV. Helped by the low nose, the result is that this upgraded Model 3 now has the lowest absolute drag of any Tesla, just 0.219 CD. It was 0.23 CD before. And as before, unlike most of its rivals, Tesla sees no need for a front grille or any pretense at one. From almost any angle, this car continues to look more like a hatch than a saloon, including from the rear. It's certainly very Model S-like, and as with that car, Tesla's mounted the charging flap neatly in the near-side rear light cluster. Those clusters have also been restyled. They now feature super bright colours and a C-shaped graphic, and are integrated into a boot lid that now features Tesla lettering rather than the previous brand badge. But as usual, what's more important is what you can't see. Unlike the larger Model S, which is made almost entirely of aluminium, the Model 3 restricts its use of that lighter weight material to the bonnet, boot, doors and roof. The rest of the structure consists primarily of high-strength steel. Right, time to check out the cabin. Now, a little disappointingly, the door handles are conventional rather than automatically popping out to greet you as they do with larger Teslas. As before, the brand seems determined to make owners and users operate the car using their provided app. Once that's been downloaded to your phone, you can unlock the car and have it ready to drive via your handset. Without the app in operation, you've to faff about with this easily mislaid RFID card and try and place it on this B-pillar touch sensor, which is difficult to locate in the day and almost impossible to find at night. Either way, to operate the door, you press on the larger part of the door release. Once inside, you find yourself seated in a cabin that's more minimalist than a Scandinavian loft, especially with this revised design. If you happen to be familiar with the previous version of this car, the main changes you'll notice lie with the deletion of column stalks and the addition of this wraparound, customisable ambient lighting strip which runs along the upper section of the doors and continues across the dashboard. Plus, the steering wheel's new, the seats have been redesigned, and there's a revised centre console with aluminium highlights that flows up towards the dash with these dual wireless phone chargers. In other words, as with the outside, more is actually different here than initially meets the eye. Perhaps the biggest change, though, lies with a generally higher feeling of perceived quality. The old Model 3 felt a bit cheap compared to most of its segment rivals. Now it doesn't. There are lots of detail reasons for this, in addition to the changes already mentioned. You can now personalise the top panel of the dashboard with inserts in a different colour or material. We've got a grey textured fabric here. And the cup holders have gained a sliding lid. There's also smarter door trim, textile with the base model and a suede finish with this dual motor variant. For us, though, the crucial change is that everything feels that bit more solidly screwed together. And in this test, we've noticed that there are few of the creaks and rattles we noticed with this car in its original form. As before, button clutter has been ruthlessly eradicated, with virtually all the driving, comfort and infotainment features you'll need relocated to this enormous 15.4-inch central touchscreen. Beyond this, operating control provision has been kept to the absolute minimum. Don't bother looking for a gear stick, a starter button or a handbrake switch. And we already mentioned that there's now no indicator stalks, replaced by buttons on the left-hand wheel spoke. You also do without physical ventilation controls, and even the air vents are pretty hidden. As usual with a Tesla, you don't get any kind of instrument cluster either. Legislation requires that the brand provides a proper hazard warning button. It's located up near the frameless rear view mirror with an SOS switch. But otherwise, switchgear-wise, you're basically limited to a couple of unmarked scroll wheels on the steering wheel spokes. Minimalism is all well and good, but if you're switching over from a more established maker, you still might find it a little hard to adapt. Compared to the cabin of a rival premium brand, the stripped-out interior vibe still doesn't exactly shout luxury. Neither does the shiny finish of the vegan leather upholstery in practically bleached white in this particular instance. As for Tesla's curious insistence on displaying the usual driving instruments on the nearer third of the central touchscreen, well, in our view, that would be fine if this layout were supplemented by a head-up display. But you can't have that, so you've constantly to be flicking your eyes away from the road and looking at the monitor. Adapting to this isn't difficult, and the way that the driving graphics show surrounding traffic really is very clever. But the whole setup isn't optimum in the way that such a clean sheet design could have been. Still, compensatory technology is absolutely dripping from every menu, and pinch and swipe action accessible through this enormously capable landscape-orientated central display. At first glance, it looks much the same as before, but now has more usable screen area thanks to a thinner bezel. Plus, it features customizable UI and, as previously, gets better over time with over-the-air updates. Now that there's no column stalk to operate the gears, you have to select forward or reverse using a vertical touch strip along the right side of the monitor. Otherwise, though, this display's functionality will be familiar to Tesla loyalists, with temperature, time and battery percentage along the top of the frame. As before, your main access point for screen features is along the bottom of the monitor via various small icons. Earlier we mentioned the lack of physical ventilation controls. Instead, you have to touch this tiny lower screen climate icon to bring up a climate menu, which requires far too much attention away from the road, a continual theme with this cabin design. There's the same problem when you want to properly operate the wipers. The virtual buttons for these, like those for the lights, are amongst the myriad of other things that sit in submenus behind this screen's lower right-hand car button. You'll need the controls part of this car section for lights and wipers, and the pedals and steering section for driving and steering modes. Eventually you'll get used to this, but it's never really ideal, and fumbling about on the screen to turn on the wipers in a sudden downpour is a real pest, and in our view, potentially dangerous. You'll also need screen menus to operate basic things like the mirrors, the seats, the steering column adjustment, and even to open the glove box. On the other hand, as before, there's lots about this Tesla monitor that we really like. For instance, the clever camera setup that can also stay on when you're driving for better all-round vision. The music system designed to function with a Spotify-style online music library that can locate any track or artist you care to name. And the arcade games that allow you to play away to your heart's content when the car is stationary. We like Skyforce Reloaded. For this improved design, the brand has sought to enhance connectivity, adding more capable microphones to improve call quality and doubling the Wi-Fi capability and cell signal. The company's improved the audio system as well, the 9-speaker setup with the bass variant enhanced to a 17-speaker system with dual subwoofers and amplifiers in this dual-motor long-range derivative. The Wi-Fi package with its easy web access can allow you to easily stream from Netflix and YouTube, and once full self-driving is approved by the regulators, Tesla says it'll activate this screen so that both front seat passengers will be able to settle back and view films from these and other sources on the move. Plus, there's still no better navigation system than that you get in the Tesla. Thanks to a 4G Google Maps connection, it can show you traffic build-up points and Google Earth images. Plus, of course, it's the point from which you'll be planning your journeys, with displays predicting the percentage of battery charge that'll remain at your required destination and the amount you'll be left with upon returning home. Enough on the screen. What else might you need to know about this cabin? Well, we mentioned this wraparound ambient lighting strip earlier. Surprisingly, Tesla's missed a trick by making its colour system passive, selectable via a screen menu. With most rivals, ambient lighting strips like these now usually form an active part of the car's controls, automatically glowing red for traffic hazards or green when charging. Perhaps that'll be in a future over-the-air update. What about driving position? Well, if you like the kind of hunkered down stance you get in a combustion-powered mid-sized sports saloon of this sort, say a BMW 3 Series for instance, well, the Model 3 can't provide that. Because you're perched on top of a bank of batteries beneath the floor, the seat's positioned about 50 millimetres higher than the combustion segment norm. This isn't quite enough for the car to feel SUV-like, but along with the panoramic windscreen and the low waistline, it certainly helps with all-round visibility, which is welcome since otherwise that might be a fraction problematic thanks to the chunky A-pillars and the slightly restricted over-the-shoulder view you get rearwards. The seat itself includes lumbar adjustment and now, along with heating, gets cool ventilation too, but some of our testers felt still managed to be a little short on lower back support. Cabin storage is obviously aided by the lack of the kind of enormous transmission tunnel that on any ordinary car would stretch between the seats up into the centre console. Tesla's used that freed up space to create a huge, now properly double-lidded central box. Its two main sliding panels ease back to reveal a couple of silver-framed cup holders and a deep bin ahead with a 12-volt socket. Further back, there's another deep-lidded bin with a concealed USB-C port you'd never find unless someone pointed it out to you. Surprisingly, there's only one such port provided for front seat folk, probably because Tesla thinks more would be unnecessary given the freshly added provision of the twin wireless phone charger compartment we mentioned earlier below the centre of the dash. You'll find that the glove box isn't especially big once you figure out how to open it, nor are the door pockets, though at least you get them, unlike in a Model S. They're illuminated and each will hold a decent-sized bottle of water. Tesla doesn't seem to have anything against sun visors because conventional ones are retained here, complete with these lovely two-piece magnetic strips that fit over the integrated mirrors, the vanity light activating as you pull away the bottom part. Okay, time to take a look in the back. Now, a relatively long wheelbase by class standards should help here. At first glance here, all seems good. There's certainly much more space than you get in a combustion engine model of this sort. Take a seat though and you'll find that the raised floor we just mentioned matched with low seat sets, the result being that you sit with your knees slightly higher than they perhaps would normally be. But once you adjust to this, you'll find that legroom isn't bad. One 6-footer can just about sit behind another, thanks in part to these slightly scalloped seat backs, though the fact that you can't slide your feet under the seat in front is something of a limiting factor. Strangely, the centre-seated passenger, who'd normally have drawn the short straw in a car of this kind, is arguably better placed here, thanks to the lack of a transmission tunnel and to the way that it's possible to slide your feet beneath the centre console. Overall, in segment terms, there's more room than you'd get in the back of a Polestar 2, but a little less space than you'd find in the rear of a Kia EV6. If you're seated behind the front passenger seat and there's no occupant in front, your legroom can be vastly improved because you can move forward said front chair using this centre screen, this 8-inch display, a freshly added feature for this revised model. This neat little monitor also alters fan speed, media sources, audio volume, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, plus you can play games on it and Tesla will improve it with over-the-air updates, just like the front screen. What else? Well, you wouldn't expect to be able to slide the bench base in an EV, but some models in this segment do allow you to alter backrest rake to improve headroom, but you can't do that here. But headroom is reasonable, even with this standard two-part glass roof fitted, which, helped by these little rear quarter-light windows, fills the cabin with light, though doesn't come with a sliding blind for the times when you want the interior to feel a little cosier. Stitched door handles and more illuminated door pockets add extra classy touches, plus there are twin central vents, rather small seat-back pockets and overhead pop-out coat hooks and ceiling-mounted reading lights. Unusually, the centre armrest has the central headrest built into it, and when retracted features silver-framed cup holders. OK, finally, let's take a look at the boot, or one of them anyway. Because there's no need for an engine up front, a front compartment sits in the nose. Now, we'll get to that once we've seen what's on offer back here, which looks like a tailgate design, but isn't. In some ways, this setup is preferable to that, thanks to an ingenious hinged arrangement that sees the boot lid opening particularly widely with this standard powered operation and leaving a particularly low access lip. Unfortunately, rainwater can flow into the boot from around the seals when it's wet. We've just opened this tailgate with the provided button, but you could also activate it using the front seat touchscreen or from the Tesla app on your phone. The capacity on offer here is 425 litres, which, to give you some segment perspective, is 24 litres bigger than a Hyundai Ioniq 6, but 45 litres less than you get from a BMW i4. Anyway, it's a good square usable space that will take up to 10 carry-on cases if you also include the room in the front compartment in the nose. Back here, buggies and golf bags will easily fit, and there are recessed areas on both sides, plus a deep well under the cargo base for the charging leads that could also take other small items you might not want sliding around the boot floor. On that subject, tie-down points are rather curiously missing, nor do you get bag hooks or a 12-volt port. If you need more room, the rear seat back can be folded, though we're disappointed to find that it still only folds with a 60-40 split. The 40-20-40 split you get in a rival BMW i4 is much more convenient, especially if you want to carry long items like skis when you've got two rear-seated passengers. Nor does it help that no boot levers are provided for the folding process here, so you have to go round to the passenger compartment and release seat shoulder catches. With everything folded, you get a reasonably flat loading bed. We'll finish with a look at the frunk, or the fruit, or whatever you want to call it, up front in the nose. Now, it can't quite swallow suitcases like the one in the Model S, but its 117-litre capacity is probably good enough for a couple of small, squishy bags. We've consistently been told by makers of EVs that as the electric market grows, so economies of scale will make battery-powered cars more affordable. Yet the evidence suggests the opposite as EV prices rise. Hardly surprising that at the time of this test in early, chilly 2024, EV sales in the UK were slipping badly. All the more refreshing then to find that once again Tesla does things differently. We've come to this vastly improved Model 3 to find that its entry-level asking price, around £40,000 in base rear-driven form, is only just over £1,000 more than it was when we first tested this car back at launch in 2019. And the improvements in specifications since more than account for that increase. In effect, this Model 3 is now cheaper than it was when first introduced, which is impressive, to say the least. As we'll touch on later, it's highly likely that you'll be spending quite a bit more than that on your Model 3, even if you can resist the temptation to upgrade from the base version, which has a battery of around 58 kilowatt hours in size, and get yourself into the long-range, dual-motor, all-wheel drive variant we're trying here, which has a battery of around 70 kilowatt hours in size and starts at around £50,000. But even this variant's priced very competitively. Above it will sit a top performance version, which hadn't yet been announced at the time of our test. Outright pricing, of course, is becoming less and less relevant these days, especially for EVs, which are usually acquired with some kind of finance. As we filmed this test, Tesla was offering a PCP option at £595 a month for a base rear-driven Model 3 over 48 months and 10,000 miles a year, based around a £6,000 down payment with APR at 9%. To give you some competitor perspective, that's just over £100 a month more than an equivalent Hyundai Ioniq 6 acquired under similar terms. Under the same terms, this dual-motor long-range Model 3 will cost you £803 a month. Obviously, you can get these figures down considerably with higher down payments up front, but they're still not particularly competitive compared to PCP schemes offered by some direct rivals. Before we get on to those rivals, a quick Tesla comparison perspective. Many potential Model 3 customers are going to be choosing between this Model 3 Saloon and the brand's alternative, almost identically engineered Model Y 5-door crossover. As we filmed, prices for the rear-driven Model Y were starting from around £45,000, so around £5,000 more than a base Model 3, while for the dual-motor long-range Model Y, as we filmed, you'd be looking at around £53,000, so around £3,000 more than this Model 3. In other words, there's a significant premium for the SUV body shape. Right, time to help you peruse the market and look at direct alternatives from other brands. Now, we're not going to spend too long briefing you on EVs in this segment that are out-and-out crossover/SUVs, because if you wanted something like that, you wouldn't be shopping for a Model 3, but that crossover Model Y. If so, switch over to our full review film on the Model Y instead. Now, if you're still with us, then in terms of the headlines here, we can tell you that as we filmed in early 2024, a rear-driven base Model 3 was able to undercut the most affordable of its direct rivals by around £5,000. Clustered around the £45,000 price point are entry rear-driven versions of the Polestar 2, the Kia EV6 and the BYD Seal, with a base version of the aforementioned Hyundai Ioniq 6 costing only a fraction more. And you'll need to stretch to just over the £50,000 price point if you want the most affordable versions of the BMW i4 and the Volkswagen ID7. As we told you earlier, in a Tesla showroom, that £50,000 spend would get you all-wheel drive and a much longer operating range in the form of the all-wheel drive dual-motor long-range Model 3 variant that we are trying today. The value perspective here isn't quite as eye-catching as it is with the rear-driven variant. The asking figure undercuts an all-wheel drive Polestar 2 by around £3,000, but it's much the same as would be required for a base all-wheel drive Hyundai Ioniq 6 or Kia EV6, and about £2,000 more than you pay for a BYD Seal in all-wheel drive form. The all-wheel drive version of the BMW i4, incidentally, is the vastly more expensive M50 variant, which costs over £70,000. If we haven't mentioned the mid-sized EV alternative you've been thinking of, then that's because it's more overtly a Model Y-style SUV, which is what you'll have to have if you want an Audi, a Volvo or a Mercedes in this segment. If you're not hung up on body shape, we'd also suggest you look at crossover newcomers in the sector, like the Fisker Ocean, which from launch was priced from just £36,000. OK, so that's briefed you on the market. Now, if having considered that, you conclude, understandably, that there's nothing quite like a Model 3 and want to consider actually buying or, say, leasing one, then you're going to need to know just how generous Tesla's been with standard spec. So let's take a look at that now. Starting with what's included on the two mainstream Model 3 variants. You get now redesigned 18-inch Photon alloy wheels, power folding mirrors and a tinted panoramic two-part glass roof with ultraviolet and infrared protection. Inside there's black premium vegan leather upholstery, more supportive 12-way power adjustable front seats, automatic climate control, climate-controlled front seats, heated front and rear seats, a 360-degree surround view camera system and an auto-dimming rear view mirror. As part of this model update, the car also now gets a new 8-inch rear seat centre display with integrated climate control, ventilation and entertainment features. This updated model also gets wraparound ambient lighting, dual wireless phone chargers and improved USB-C charging ports, one at the front and 2 at the rear, each with up to 65 watts of power. The key cabin feature, though, is the front cockpit's 15.4-inch centre touchscreen that seamlessly integrates media, navigation, communications, cabin control and vehicle data into one intuitive interface. And throughout your ownership period, over-the-air updates into it will add functionality, enhance performance and improve the driving experience of your car. As you'd expect, the screen is your access point to things like navigation, a DAB tuner and Bluetooth, plus lots more. There's still no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto option here, but Tesla has its own smartphone mirroring system that works almost as well and includes native support for Spotify, Apple Music and Tidal. The audio system's reasonable too, with the rear-driven version offering 9 speakers, a subwoofer and an amplifier. Elsewhere on this centre monitor, if you scroll down the centre screen menu options, you'll also find a host of little touches like the arcade games that'll entertain you if you're stuck in a traffic jam or waiting for a pickup. And the clever Sentry mode that you can activate as a guard to record any damage to your car, say when you've left it parked. Should that happen, the Model 3's camera system will record the incident so you've evidence to help apprehend the perpetrator. Other cameras can be used to record dash cam footage for the same kind of purpose. You might be wondering if there are any spec differences between the rear-driven and dual-motor versions of this car, apart, of course, from this long-range version's drivetrain, bigger battery and extra motor. Well, there aren't many. The key equipment change with this dual-motor derivative is the addition of a premium 17-speaker audio system with a dual subwoofer and dual amplifier setup. The only other change between the two variants is an upgrade to door finishing. The textile trim of the rear-driven model gets replaced by smarter suede trim on this dual-motor model. As I said earlier, at the time of this test in early 2024, Tesla hadn't yet announced details of the only Model 3 derivative we haven't yet mentioned, the top performance Model 3 variant, but we wouldn't expect its features to differ hugely from those fitted to the pre-facelift version. That means all the long-range derivatives features plus a package of others. Previous performance spec Model 3s were recognisable by a carbon fibre rear spoiler, lowered suspension and larger 20-inch performance wheels, shod with bespoke Michelin P44S tyres and featuring the red calipers of an uprated braking system. Performance spec features inside previously included aluminium alloy pedals and a selectable track mode. This special setting does quite a lot at the press of a single screen button. It shuttles torque between front and rear axles for extra cornering traction. It increases regenerative braking to capture extra energy more efficiently. It recalibrates the cooling system to make it more effective, and it uses a vehicle dynamics controller to dial back the traction and stability control systems so that they allow more slip. So much so, in fact, that pro driver circuit corner drifting is entirely possible. But back to the two mainstream Model 3 variants we're focusing on here. Let's go on to consider the options you might want to add. There aren't many. For an extra £1,100, you can pay extra to specify a black and white coloured interior. Unusually for an EV, you can pay more for a tow hitch, this one able to tug up to 1,000 kilos. And bear in mind that you'll almost certainly be paying the brand extra for your choice of paint colour. Tesla's pearl white multi-coat finish is the only one you get as standard. The others, at £1,300 more, are solid black and deep blue metallic, or if you're prepared to pay £2,000 more, there are two freshly added colours, ultra red or this smart stealth grey multi-coat finish. There are no other bodywork shades available. Tesla has begun to offer a bodywork wrapping service for new Model 3s in the USA, but you can't have that here yet. For £1,500 more, you can add larger 19-inch Nova alloy wheels to replace these smart, dark 18 inches, though we wouldn't advise it, as those bigger rims will take 31 miles off your EV driving range. If you're new to EVs, you might also want to get Tesla's branded wall connector for your garage. This offers charging speeds of up to 44 miles of range per hour, has a 7.3 metre cable and costs £475, excluding installation. We normally finish this section of these reviews by talking about safety. As this car's 5-star rating from Euro NCAP suggests, all the passive stuff's well covered. So there's the usual stability and autonomous braking features, plus pedestrian-friendly panel work, and of course a full complement of airbags. On a dual motor model like this one, the second motor sits within the front subframe. Attached via 2 mounts, it's designed to pivot backwards into a vacant space during a collision, better protecting the passenger compartment. This is clever. So much about this car is, and it goes some of the way towards explaining why safety experts Euro NCAP gave this car a maximum 5-star rating, including very impressive 96 and 84% scores in the adult and child occupant protection categories. NCAP also gave the Model 3 a high rating at 94% in the safety assist category, and you'll be wanting to know about that. Well, all Model 3s, like all Teslas, get the basic version of the brand's autopilot system, which uses 8 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors and a forward-facing radar. These all combine to deliver an impressive roster of features. There's autonomous braking, of course, courtesy of what Tesla calls its forward collision warning and automatic emergency brake systems. And as you'd expect on a car of this price, there's a blind spot collision feature to stop you from pulling out when there's a vehicle in your blind spot. This works via a red indicator in the upper speaker grille in each front corner of the cockpit, and auto-dipping headlamps come as standard as well. But Tesla's gone further than that. The thing we all love about electric cars is the instant acceleration they give, but that can get you into a lot of trouble if you hit the accelerator too hard when, say, you're in a traffic jam or when parking. An obstacle-aware acceleration feature aims to take care of that for you. If your Tesla senses that there's something like a car or a building in front of you, it will limit your acceleration if you accidentally tap on the accelerator too hard or confuse the brake pedal with the accelerator, so enabling you to avoid an expensive collision. And there's more. Emergency lane departure avoidance will automatically steer your car back into its lane if the software thinks you're going to crash or veer off the road. Then there's lane departure avoidance, a system first introduced in the US to combat situations where Tesla drivers were engaging the car's traffic-aware cruise control, then moving lanes on the highway without turn signals and without hands on the steering wheel. Lane departure avoidance will admonish you for this, and if you keep on doing it, then the system will eventually turn on your hazard lights and automatically slow down the car to 15 miles below either the speed limit or your current set speed. This feature can be turned on or off at will and works between speeds of 25 and 90 miles an hour. If you want more, then you'll need to invest another £3,400 in the enhanced autopilot option Tesla offers. You get what the brand calls full self-driving capability. As part of this, with initially 2 key features. First, your Model 3 will navigate using the autopilot system, which will give you automatic driving from motorway on-ramp to off-ramp, including interchanges and overtaking slower cars. Second, there's an auto lane change feature that gives you automatic motorway lane changes. Just flick the indicator in the direction you want to go, and once the camera system's given you the all clear, you're automatically steered over into the next lane. Buy into the enhanced autopilot package, and in the near future, over-the-air updates will add further clever features to it. You'll get an auto park system that'll help you identify a parallel or perpendicular space, then steer your Tesla into it. and a summon feature that'll allow you to park your car using your smartphone while standing outside it, as you might want to do if, say, you're trying to get into a very narrow space. If you really want to blow the budget on futuristic drive tech, Tesla will also sell you its full self-driving capability package for a cool extra spend of £6,800. As we filmed, all that considerable spend delivered was a traffic light and stop sign control feature, but for the future, UK legislation permitting. If your Model 3's been fitted with this top package, Tesla will add to it further functionality that will give your car a degree of automatic driving capability on city streets. You may also be able to add the brand's enhanced summon feature, which will allow your Model 3 to come and find you in a car park if you're a few rows away and can't remember where you put it. Brilliant. Once upon a time, as an EV buyer, you bought a Tesla because of its vast advantage in operating range over any other battery-powered car on the market. Today, though, things are a little different. The 318-mile WLTP-rated range from the 58 kilowatt-hour battery of the Volume single-motor rear-wheel drive version is a showing bettered by just about every direct segment rival, bar the base eDrive 35 version of BMW's i4. Looking at direct rivals in their base rear-driven forms, at the time of this test in early 2024, you'd go 10 miles further in a Kia EV6, around 20 miles further in a Hyundai Ioniq 6 or a Polestar 2, 36 miles further in a BYD Seal, and 66 miles further in a Volkswagen ID.7. So, Tesla has work to do here, as was inevitable. The opposition has caught up. Switch your attention to a pricier dual-motor all-wheel drive Model 3 like this one though, and Tesla's original EV range advantage still remains. The standard dual-motor variant we're trying here manages a 390-mile WLTP rated reading from its 70 kilowatt-hour battery pack. That's 42 miles more than when we last tested it back in 2019. To give you some perspective on that, the best of the current crop of battery-powered mid-sized saloon all-wheel drive rivals is the long-range dual-motor version of Polestar's 2, which manages 368 miles between charges. Other rivals struggle to go much more than 320 miles, and an all-wheel drive Kia EV6 is down at just 314 miles. What you'll actually get from any of these cars if you drive normally is slightly different, of course. If you want a rule of thumb, think in terms of around 270 miles from a single-motor rear-wheel drive version, which you can expect to average around 3.7 miles per kilowatt-hour in regular real-world use. Think maybe around 320 miles in mixed real-world use from a dual-motor variant like this, though we're perfectly prepared to believe that you could improve upon that figure by up to 20% with a little driving care. We've been getting around 4.4 miles per kilowatt-hour from this dual-motor model during this test. That figure would, of course, be a lot better if, like virtually all EVs, this one wasn't weighed down like the proverbial brick by its huge battery. In this case, the total curb weight is 1,828 kilos. Even if you stick to the single-motor rear-wheel drive version, there's still a compelling reason to choose a Model 3 over an EV from another brand, and it'll be obvious when the time comes to pull back the neatly disguised panel around the near-side rear light cluster and replenish your battery power. We'll get to that unique selling point in a moment, but first, let's cover public DC charging speeds. Though there's quite a difference in battery size between the rear-driven and dual-motor models, both charge in about the same time, 10 to 80% in about 25 minutes. Because the rear-wheel drive version's 58 kilowatt-hour battery can only charge at up to 170 kilowatt-hours, while this dual-motor variant charges at up to 250 kilowatts. It's still a 400-volt charging system though, so you won't have access to the ultra-rapid 350 kilowatt public chargers you'd be able to use to full capacity with a rival Kia EV6 or Hyundai Ioniq 6, both cars that boast the 800-volt charging infrastructure that presumably Tesla will upgrade to at some point. At present, the company thinks this step to be unnecessary, and they could be right, as it is a fast DC public charging point would add around 150 miles of driving range to your Model 3 every 30 minutes, which will probably be a sufficiently fast level of replenishment for most owners. Now to that unique selling point. This US brand is the only manufacturer that's had the guts to put itself on the line by going out and creating its own exclusive high-power charging network, the Tesla Supercharger Network, which now features over 1,000 charging points spread across over 100 locations throughout the UK. Venture abroad and you'll find over 12,000 supercharger locations in Europe. In Britain, the most southerly supercharger site location is at Lifton in Devon, and the most northerly one is at Aviemore in Scotland. Each of these sites are only accessible to Tesla drivers. On top of that, there are the superchargers fitted in the brand's dealer network, and the company has installed a further 550 less powerful but still very useful so-called destination chargers in clubs, hotels and other public locations around the country, also exclusive to Tesla drivers, and there to charge your car over a few hours. In other words, if you drive a Model 3 or any other Tesla, you're far more likely to be able to undertake a longer trip with mid-journey charging at a convenient point than you would be if you bought a different EV from another mainstream or premium brand. That's a crucial advantage, particularly with the current patchy state of the European public EV charging infrastructure. Especially as this Tesla can also be recharged at nearly all the other places other makers' electric vehicles can plug in, or absolutely all of them if you purchase the optional CHAdeMO adapter your Tesla Centre can sell you. Earlier Tesla models which lacked the necessary CCS adapter couldn't do this. In terms of other charging stations, your best bet is to find one of the 150 kilowatt Ionity charging points, but there still aren't as many of those across the UK as perhaps there should be. Websites like ZapMap are good for helping you find your nearest public charger, or you can use your Model 3's infotainment screen to organise your journey between charge stations. Fortunately, most of your charging with this car will be done at home once you've had fitted the 7.4 kilowatt wall box that you couldn't really own this car without. Home charging with this from empty to full takes 9 hours 15 minutes with the 58 kilowatt hour rear driven model, or 12 hours with this 70 kilowatt hour dual motor version. That works out to around 37 miles of range for each hour of charging. Either way, this all means that the usual EV manufacturer claim of full overnight charging is only just about justified and won't add up at all if you happen to have a late night and an early start. For reference, if you connected this Model 3 up to an ordinary household 3-pin socket, it would take the best part of 2 days to charge itself from empty. At the other extreme, if your property has a 3-phase supply and you can fit an 11 kilowatt wall box, you'll be able to recharge your Model 3 from empty to full in about 8 hours. If a normal wall box will suffice, Tesla will sell you its own branded wall connector for your garage, which offers charging speeds of up to 44 miles of range per hour, has a 7.3 metre cable and costs £475, excluding installation. When it comes to home charging, there's still complexity around the best charging hardware to choose and who's eligible for a government grant. And obviously the costs can vary depending on the distance from your main meter to the charger and other factors. There's lots of advice out there, of course, to guide you. We consulted plugmein.com, who offer customers everything from choice of charger to installation and ongoing maintenance. They've advised us that even with increased energy prices, the cost of running an EV and charging it at home on a dedicated tariff is still only around half the cost of running your previous petrol or diesel car. If you don't charge at home, the story's very different. Some DC public chargers, even Tesla superchargers, can be just as or even more expensive as filling up with petrol. But let's assume you're charging primarily from home, using an average energy rate of 30 pence per kilowatt hour as a guide. Fully charging the base 58 kilowatt hour rear wheel drive variant will cost you around £18. Think just over £20 for this dual motor model, though these figures would of course reduce if you charged using an EV specific energy tariff. Obviously you can keep costs down by sticking to off-peak energy rates, and setting charging times to do this can of course be done via the car's centre screen, via a dedicated charging section, or of course by the Tesla app. The same app can also allow you to preset the climate in your car before you reach it, so you don't have to strain the battery with a big initial need for cabin heating or cooling when you get in. And the app can quickly tell you where to find nearby Tesla supercharging and destination charging locations. It'd be even better, of course, if you were able to charge up using solar energy generated from panels on the roof of your house. If your home has these solar charging panels that work with a photovoltaic system, the car can be set to charge preferentially using sunlight-sourced electricity, and can even be set to charge in line with forecast phases of sunshine. Tesla makes solar panels, by the way, and can also provide a Powerwall home battery, which the last time we looked cost an extra £6,350 to conveniently store all the energy that any brand of solar panelling will produce. If you're new to EVs, you might be slightly put off by all the potential charging issues, but then again, you might not. After all, it's quite unlikely that a typical Model 3 owner will be running this Tesla as an only car. And we're perfectly aware that the average person's daily round-trip commute is about a tenth of the operating range of this Tesla. Ah yes, range, we're back to that. Other EVs provide almost endless driver tools for maximising this, things like efficiency modes, eco settings, and primarily a proliferation of brake regeneration options aimed at allowing you to either reduce or increase the amount of energy harvested as you slow the car. There's little of that here. It's surprising that Tesla doesn't feel the need to involve the driver more in the energy harvesting process. There is of course a regenerative braking system, but here it works automatically, allowing the powertrain to reclaim spent energy as you cruise, slow or stop. As you take your foot off the accelerator, the electric motors work in reverse, becoming generators of electricity to recharge the battery. In fact, on a hilly road, it's possible to gain much of the energy you used going uphill through regenerative braking on the way down. As you'd expect, the car's central screen offers lots of data to help plan your electric driving life. We've already mentioned how both this monitor and the associated app can brief you on your plug-in program and on charging locations. And of course, there are the usual real-time battery status readouts. But your Model 3 can certainly be a lot more proactive than that. Put a destination into the navigation system and it will helpfully tell you the proportion of battery charge you'll still have when you reach where you're going, and the proportion you'll have when you arrive back home. If the destination you've chosen can't be reached with the driving range you have available, then charging points along the route will be selected for you. Once you set off, the calculations continue based on your driving style, so you'll be advised if, for example, you're cruising at too fast a speed to reach your destination on the charge available. What else might you need to know? Maybe you'll be interested in the fact that as an EV vehicle owner, until 2025 you'll be exempt from London congestion and ULEZ charge, and also until that date you won't pay VED car tax, and benefit in kind taxation will be at a super low 2%. At the time of this test in early 2024, that BIK tax figure saw 20% taxpayers levied at £160 a year, while 40% taxpayers were BIK levied at £320 a year. As for ownership peace of mind, well, the Tesla warranty, 4 years and 50,000 miles, has pluses and minuses compared to the usual 3-year or 60,000 mile packages offered by obvious rivals. It's a bit slow on the mileage side, but it covers you against most faults. And as usual with an EV, the battery and drive unit get their own warranty. Here it's an 8-year package that lasts for 100,000 miles with the rear wheel drive variant, or 120,000 miles with this dual motor derivative. Either way, the package guarantees a minimum 70% retention of battery capacity throughout the planned duration. Achieving that figure is unlikely to be an issue, as Tesla has an excellent reputation for battery longevity. Maintenance is obviously more straightforward than it would be for a combustion engined model. An electric vehicle does, after all, have about 20% fewer moving parts. There's no fuel tank, no exhaust system, and obviously no internal combustion engine. You wouldn't think that, though, to look at the service intervals needed by some of this car's direct rivals. With the Model 3, no annual service is required. Owners only need to bring their cars in to check certain components at specific intervals. Tesla doesn't state when these should be. The car will inform you if it needs attention. However, the brand recommends checking the brake fluid and the interior air filter every 2 years. Over-the-air updates and remote diagnostics will help make some smaller maintenance jobs easier to carry out, and Tesla's mobile service technicians are also there to make your ownership life more convenient. There's a service section of the center screen's car menu which briefs you on tyre pressures and allows you to integrate a provided car wash mode. Less good news is found when it comes to insurance group ratings for this Model 3. The base rear-wheel drive version is rated right up at Group 48, while this dual motor version rates at a top-of-the-shop Group 50, which is ludicrous. Brokers, it seems, don't like electric cars. They're afraid of the cost of replacing the complex drive system after a complete wreck. It also seems that they particularly don't like Teslas. For comparison, a BMW i4 rates from Group 36. When we consulted industry sources, we were told that this differential was down to the poor U rating that Tesla's received for this design standard of security. It was judged by industry testers Thatcham Research to only offer basic levels of protection for vehicle security, with low scores achieved by a number of integrated security systems, including the fitment and effectiveness of alarms, immobilizers, double locking systems, and wheel locking. None of this seems to have been addressed as part of this product update, so those high insurance groupings remain. However, don't give up hope of relatively affordable cover. LV offer a specific package for EV drivers, and Tesla's negotiated a special deal with Direct Line that a lot of its owners use. Ultimately, though, you'll probably pay more to insure a Model 3 than would be the case with a direct rival. If you let Tesla guide you, you'll find that it won't be that much more. You might also expect gloomy news when it comes to the issue of residual values. EVs did, after all, used to sink like a stone in terms of depreciation. As the market's matured, though, things have improved. Independent experts are saying that both Model 3 variants should retain around 46 to 48% of its value over 3 years and 36,000 miles. That's not terrible, but it's nowhere near class leading. A rival BMW i4, for instance, holds on to around 47 to 54% of its initial asking price over the same period. Though to be fair, an i4 is quite a bit pricier to buy in the first place. A Polestar 2, closer in price to a Model 3, holds on to about 48 to 53% in the same period. What about the green issues? Well, some in the green lobby get very angry about the whole pure electric car, zero emissions ethos, reckoning that this ignores the well-to-wheel demands of supplying the electricity that powers cars of this kind. We'd respond by pointing out that these people usually completely overlook the fact that CO2 figures for conventional cars fail to take into account the logistical cost of getting fuel to the pump. Still, if you're one of those enviro-conscious folk, we'll tell you that using a well-to-wheels calculation based on typical use of the UK's energy grid, taking an average UK grid CO2 contribution of 367 grams per kilowatt, The burden of filling your batteries in this car would result in a theoretical 79 grams per kilometre of CO2 being released into the atmosphere. That's certainly good, but some way from being completely green. Which is also a comment you could apply to electric vehicle engineering as a whole. Lithium-ion batteries aren't yet completely recyclable in the way that the fuel cells used in hydrogen-powered vehicles are. Currently, when EV vehicles are reaching the end of their lives, the batteries are being reused as electricity storage buffers. After that, though, they can't simply be scrapped because lithium-ion has explosive elements. That's an issue, but then so is the pollution caused by combustion. If you see the EV solution as the lesser of the two evils and your choice of a battery-powered model must be from the premium segment, we think you'll find plenty to interest you here. A lot of people have a lot to say about Tesla and its co-creator, Elon Musk. Here, though, our job is to talk about the cars it makes, specifically this one, which to begin with caused the brand more headaches than any other in its history. But then perhaps you'd expect that. It's one thing to build relatively low-volume cars that sell in the £75,000 to £125,000 bracket, as Tesla did with the Model S when it started off. But quite another to make one for the volume market, where per-unit profits are lower and product scrutiny much greater. The Model 3 was that car, and in the years since, it's gone on to redefine its brand. But the EV market has moved on since 2017, so it's just as well that the Model 3 has moved with it, creating this heavily revised Project Highland design. It now offers cabin quality and drive refinement to justify its asking price. And equally impressively, the asking price of the most affordable version of this car has been set at the kind of level that would usually get you a much smaller EV than this. As before, the handling feels sharp, and the EV driving range figure of this dual motor variant remains class-leading. Are there issues? Well, yes, a few. The driving range return of the entry-level rear-driven single-motor version remains disappointing, and we don't think that dispensing with column stalks has proved to be a very good idea. But you might like it. This is, after all, part of the futuristic avant-garde feel this car wants to champion. And in summary, well, if you didn't already want a Model 3, the improvements made here may not be enough to convince you over alternatives from more established brands. But if you've always hankered after one of these, then this update package will please you very much indeed. You'd still have to like the cool, pared-back image of the Model 3 to want one, and be forgiving of a few idiosyncrasies. But if none of that matters, then you'll find that what's on offer here is as significant as it's ambitious. You'd expect that from the car some said Tesla could never build, but it has, and you should try it.